The first warning wasn't the trucks. It was the silence. Out on the high desert, silence isn't empty. It's watchful. It presses against your ears like something alive, something waiting to see what you'll do next. I felt it the moment I stepped out of my pickup and shut the door of my new ranch behind me. The sound echoed too long. No birds, no wind, just me, a rusted gate, and 62,000 acres of land no one else wanted. Or so I thought. I hadn't even finished unlocking the chain when the ground began to tremble. At first, I assumed it was thunder rolling in from the west. Then the dust rose, thick, fast, deliberate. 4 plumes on the horizon, 4 engines, moving hard. Within minutes, 4 trucks came tearing across the scrubland like they owned it. Not ranch trucks, not beat-up locals heading home. These were heavy-duty diesels, lifted, armored underneath, tires built for war with the land. They didn't slow down until they hit my gate. They didn't honk. They didn't wave. They fanned out. 1 truck blocked the road behind me. Another pulled nose-to-nose with my pickup. The other 2 angled in, cutting off every possible exit. Doors opened. Boots hit dirt. I counted 6 men. No, 7, spread out like they practiced this exact move before. One of them tipped his hat back and smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "You're on the wrong property," he said. I looked at the deed in my hand. Fresh ink, county seal, my name. "I just bought it," I replied. The man's smile vanished. That's when I realized the ranch wasn't bankrupt because it was worthless. It was bankrupt because someone wanted it abandoned, and they hadn't expected me to show up. 3 days earlier, I'd been sitting in a foreclosure auction room that smelled like burnt coffee and bad decisions. The ranch came up last, no bids for nearly a minute. 62,000 acres, a collapsed cattle operation, no water rights listed. Environmental issues, the auctioneer said, like an afterthought. I raised my paddle anyway. People turned to look at me the way you look at someone stepping onto thin ice on purpose. One man actually laughed. Another shook his head. The final price was less than a downtown studio apartment. When the gavel fell, it felt unreal, like I'd just bought a ghost. The paperwork took longer than the bidding. By the time I drove out there, the sun was already dropping low, staining the land orange and red like an old bruise. The ranch house sat a mile from the gate, roof sagging, windows dark, porch half collapsed. The place looked dead. But dead things don't usually attract armed strangers in coordinated trucks. Back at the gate, one of the men stepped closer. I noticed details in matching radios, identical gloves, the way they never turned their backs to each other. Not locals, not random. "You need to leave," he said. "Calm, firm. This land's tied up." "Tied up how?" I asked. He glanced toward the horizon, then back at me, "In ways you don't want." I held up the deed. "County says it's mine." Another man laughed, sharp, humorless. "County doesn't know everything." The leader took a step closer until we were only a few feet apart. I could smell diesel and dust on him. "You got this cheap for a reason," he said. "Previous owners didn't just lose money. They lost enthusiasm." That word hit wrong. "Are you threatening me?" I asked. He shrugged. "I'm advising you." Behind him, one of the trucks idled louder, as if on cue. The message was clear. "Leave now, quietly, and this ends." But something inside me snapped. Maybe it was the months of scraping by. Maybe it was the years of watching other people decide who gets pushed off what land. Or maybe it was just the fact that I was tired of running. "I'm not leaving," I said. The desert seemed to inhale. For a long moment, no one spoke. Wind finally kicked up, dragging dust across our boots. The men exchanged looks, not angry, not surprised, calculating. The leader nodded slowly. "Then you need to understand something," he said. "This ranch isn't empty. It's claimed." "By who?" I asked. He smiled again, this time colder. "That's the part you'll figure out too late." They climbed back into their trucks. No threats, no gun drawn, just engines roaring back to life. As they pulled away, one of them leaned out the window and shouted, "You've got until sundown to change your mind." Then they were gone, leaving behind 4 tracks carved deep into the dirt. like scars. I stood there alone, the deed trembling slightly in my hand. That was the moment I understood the truth. I didn't buy a failed ranch. I bought the center of someone else's operation, and they weren't done with me yet. The sun slid behind the mesas faster than it should have, like it didn't want to witness what came next. I didn't leave. That decision felt brave for exactly 5 minutes. Then the desert grew teeth. As dusk settled, the temperature dropped hard, the kind of cold that sneaks under your collar and reminds you how far you are from help. I drove past the gate and followed the rutted dirt road toward the ranch house, constantly checking my mirrors. Every dust cloud looked like headlights. Every shadow felt like movement. The house was worse up close. The porch sagged like a broken jewel. The front door hung open, creaking softly in the wind, tapping against the frame as if someone inside was knocking to be let out. I stepped in with a flashlight and immediately caught the smell: old smoke, rot, and something metallic underneath. Blood. Not fresh. Old. Rusted into the floorboards in dark, ugly streaks. The living room looked like it had been searched in a hurry. Drawers yanked out. Cushions sliced open. Papers scattered everywhere, most of them torn or burned. On one wall, someone had scratched symbols into the wood, arrows, numbers, circles around certain dates. It didn't look random. It looked frantic. I found the office last. The desk was overturned, but one filing cabinet remained locked. It took me 10 minutes and a crowbar from my truck to get it open. Inside were maps, dozens of them. Topographic charts of the ranch and surrounding land, layered with handwritten notes. Red XS, blue lines. One area circled over and over again near the northern ridge. Water sources. That stopped me cold. According to the auction listing, the ranch had failed because of water issues. Wells ran dry. Cattle died. Investors pulled out. But these maps told a different story. Underground aquifers marked deep and precise, with flow notes and pressure readings. Someone had known exactly where the water was. Someone had hidden it. I barely slept that night. I barricaded the front door with furniture and kept my truck keys in my pocket. Every sound outside, every coyote yelp, every branch scraping the siding, made my heart hammer. Once, around 2 a.m., I swore I saw headlights far off on the ridge. They disappeared before I could be sure. Morning came like a relief and a threat all at once. I spent the next day exploring the property. The ranch was massive, rolling scrub, rocky outcroppings, dry creek beds that hadn't seen rain in years. But the further north I went, the greener it became. Patches of grass that didn't make sense. Soil darker, damper. Then I found the fence. It wasn't marked on any official map. Heavy steel posts sunk deep into the ground, stretching nearly a mile along a ridge. On the other side, the land dipped into a shallow basin, and at the bottom of it, tucked between rocks, was a wellhead. Modern. Maintained. I knelt and touched the metal. Cool. Vibrating faintly. Water was being pumped. Recently. That's when I heard the engine. I barely made it behind a boulder before a truck crested the ridge, one of the same models from the day before. It stopped near the well. 2 men got out. They wore work gear this time, not intimidation uniforms. They moved efficiently, checking gauges, making adjustments, logging something on a tablet. This wasn't a ranch dispute. It was an operation. I snapped photos with my phone, hands shaking. When one of the men looked up suddenly, I dropped flat, hot in my throat. After a tense minute, they finished up and drove off, heading north, off my land, onto property I didn't own. Back at the house, I found a satellite phone hidden under a floorboard in the office. No SIM card. Dead. But underneath it was a notebook wrapped in oilcloth. The previous owner's journal. The first entry was hopeful, talk of reviving the ranch, drilling deeper wells, saving the cattle. Then the tone shifted. Mentions of of trucks watching the road, of water disappearing overnight, of county officials suddenly refusing permits. One line was underlined 3 times. They don't want cattle. They want control. The last entry was dated 2 weeks before the foreclosure. They offered to buy me out. Cash. No paperwork. I said no. Last night, they cut the power and poisoned the south well. If anyone reads this, don't trust the maps they sell you. The real value is under the ridge, and they'll kill for it. I closed the notebook slowly. That night, the trucks came back. Not 4 this time. 6. They parked outside the gate again, but didn't block it. Instead, they turned on their lights. High beams pointed straight at the house. A spotlight swept across the windows, blinding. A voice boomed through a loudspeaker. "You had your warning." I stepped onto the porch, hands visible, heart pounding so hard I thought it might give me away. "I know about the water," I shouted back. Silence. Then the leader's voice, "Calmer now. Then you know why you shouldn't be here." "That water's on my land," I said. "You're stealing it." A pause. Then laughter, several voices, overlapping. "You think that matters," he replied. "You think ownership means anything out here." One of the trucks rolled forward slowly, crunching gravel. Another engine revved behind it. "This ranch failed because we needed it to," the voice continued. "And if you don't walk away tonight, it'll fail again, with you attached to it." I glanced back at the house, at the bloodstains, the journal, the maps. I thought about how easily people disappear in places like this. Then I said the dumbest, bravest thing of my life. "I'm not selling." The spotlight snapped off. For a moment, everything went dark. Then a single shot rang out, cracking the night open. The porch railing exploded inches from my hand, splinters flying. I dove inside as another shot hit the wall. They weren't trying to kill me. They were showing me how easily they could. When the engines finally faded into the distance, I sat on the floor shaking, surrounded by silence once again. I knew then I had 2 choices. Run, and let whatever this was continue unchecked. Or stay, and dig deep enough to expose exactly what this land was hiding. And something told me they were far more afraid of the second option. By sunrise, fear had hardened into something sharper. Anger. I packed my truck with a journal, the maps, extra fuel, and the one thing I hadn't planned on needing, proof. The bullet hole in the porch railing stared at me as I drove away, a reminder that last night wasn't a bluff. It was a promise. The nearest town was almost 90 miles away. 1 road in, 1 road out. The kind of place where everyone knows when a stranger arrives. And why? By the time I rolled in, dust-coated and sleep-deprived, every eye at the gas station tracked me like I was already a problem. I went straight to the county offices. The building looked official enough, flags out front, polished seal on the door, but the inside felt hollow. Too quiet, too clean. The clerk barely looked up when I said my name. When I said the ranch's parcel number, she froze for half a second too long. "That property?" she asked. "Yes," I said. "I bought it at auction." Her smile tightened. "You should speak with a land use director." The director didn't want to see me. I waited 3 hours in a vinyl chair while phones rang unanswered and staff whispered behind closed doors. When he finally came out, he didn't invite me in. He stood in the hallway, arms crossed, already defensive. "There's nothing to discuss," he said after I explained. "That ranch is a known loss." "There's an active well on the North Ridge," I replied. "Modern equipment, pumping water off my land." His eyes flicked, just once, toward the clerk. "That's not possible," he said. "No permits have been issued." "Then explain this." I laid the maps on a nearby table, the journal, photos of the wellhead, tire tracks, timestamps. The director didn't touch them. Instead, he leaned closer and lowered his voice. "You need to be careful," he said. "Accusations like this can get people into trouble." "I've already been shot at," I said flatly. That got his attention, for about 2 seconds. Then he straightened. "I suggest you sell the property. Quietly. There are parties willing to compensate you fairly." "Who?" I asked. He shook his head. "That information isn't public." "Neither is intimidation," I snapped. "Or water theft." The director sighed, like a tired parent dealing with a stubborn child. "Listen to me. That land sits over resources bigger than this county. Bigger than me. If you push, you won't like what pushes back." I gathered my papers. "Then I'll go federal." That did it. His face drained of color. "That would be unwise." I left without another word. Outside, a black SUV idled across the street. Same model as one of the truck support vehicles. The driver didn't hide his stare. I didn't go straight back to the ranch. Instead, I drove north, past my property line, following the direction I'd seen the workers go. The road narrowed, then disappeared entirely, turning into a graded dirt track that hadn't been on any public map. After 10 miles, I found the facility. From a distance, it looked like a weather station, solar panels, storage tanks, a few low buildings. Up close, it was something else entirely. Heavy fencing, cameras, armed guards, and water, tank after tank of it. I parked on a ridge and watched through binoculars. Tanker trucks came and went, each marked with different company logos, construction firms, agricultural suppliers, even municipal contractors, shell companies, plausible deniability. They weren't just stealing water. They were laundering it, selling it off-grid, off-record, while officially declaring the basin dry, driving ranches into bankruptcy, buying land cheap, expanding control. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. I didn't answer. Another buzz, then a text. You're making this harder than it needs to be. I typed back one word. Good. I didn't make it home before dark. Halfway back to the ranch, my truck lost power. No warning lights. No sputter. Just dead. I coasted to the shoulder as headlights flared behind me. Same 4 trucks. They didn't surround me this time. They stopped at a distance. The leader got out alone. You should have taken the offer, he said, standing just out of reach. You poisoned the wells, I said. You drove families off their land. He shrugged. Progress is casualties. I went to the county. I added. That earned me a thin smile. And I'm not stopping. His expression hardened. Then neither are we. He nodded once. One of the trucks rolled forward and clipped my rear bumper, not hard enough to wreck it, hard enough to send a message. You won't make it to the ranch tonight, he said, or tomorrow, or the next day. They left me there, engine dead, night closing in. I walked the last 7 miles. When I reached the gate, something new waited for me. A package, zip-tied to the fence. Inside was a USB drive and a note. Last chance. I didn't sleep. Instead, I plugged the drive into an old laptop I'd brought for emergencies. What came up made my blood run cold. Internal emails, payment records, county officials, state water boards, environmental assessments falsified, names I recognized, names I didn't, a web of corruption reaching far beyond my ranch. And at the center of it all, a parent company I'd never heard of, registered offshore, tied to private investors with one shared interest. Water scarcity futures. They were manufacturing drought. I leaned back, staring at the screen, the weight of it settling in. This wasn't about land. This was about control of the one thing everyone would soon be desperate for. And somehow, impossibly, I was standing right in the middle of it. They thought fear would make me fold. Instead, it had made me dangerous. Fear had failed them. That realization changed everything. I stopped thinking like a victim and started thinking like a problem they hadn't planned for. If they were manufacturing drought, then exposure, not confrontation, was the weapon. I copied the file from the USB drive onto 3 separate hard drives, encrypted them, and hid them in different places. One buried in a sealed ammo box near the dry creek bed, one taped beneath the floorboards, and one I kept with me at all times. If they wanted silence, they were going to have to erase me completely. The next move couldn't involve the county. They were compromised. It couldn't involve local law enforcement either. Too many familiar names in those emails. I needed someone outside the gravity well of this place. So I reached out to an investigative journalist I'd met years earlier at a conference. She specialized in environmental corruption and had a habit of surviving lawsuits that destroyed other reporters. I sent her one message. If I disappear, publish everything. Her reply came an hour later. Start from the beginning, slowly, and don't trust anyone. While waiting, I did the one thing they least expected. I drilled, not at the marked well sites, not where the map said. I used the previous owner's notes, the ones that didn't match the official charts, the margins, the corrections, the spots he'd circled, then crossed out, then circled again. I rented a portable drilling rig under a fake company name and hauled it in at night, keeping it hidden under camo netting during the day. Every sound felt too loud. Every distant engine made my spine tighten. On the third night, we struck water. Not a trickle, not a slow seep. A pressurized surge that nearly blew the cap off the rig. Clean, cold, abundant. I laughed once before clamping a hand over my mouth. Tears burned my eyes, half relief, half fury. They hadn't just been stealing water. They'd been suppressing it, rerouting it, choking the land to force compliance. I capped the well and buried it again. This wasn't about using the water yet. It was about proof. The response was swift. The next morning, drones. They buzzed the ranch in overlapping patterns, low and aggressive, cameras swiveling. I counted 5, then 8, then lost track. One hovered directly over the house, close enough that I could see the serial number scratched off the casing. That night, the power went out again, but this time, it wasn't just a ranch. The entire valley went dark. That's when the fire started. North Ridge. Controlled. Deliberate. They weren't burning randomly. They were burning access routes, escape pods, covering something up under smoke and chaos. I grabbed my truck keys and hard drive and headed for high ground, watching flames chew through scrubland that hadn't burned in decades. Over the radio, emergency channels crackled with confusion. Fire crews rerouted. Resources unavailable. Helicopters grounded for safety concerns. Someone wanted this fire. At dawn, black SUVs rolled in. Not the trucks this time. Men in clean uniforms. No insignias. Federal posture without federal markings. One approached the gate and called my name. "You're in possession of stolen materials," he said. "This land is under review." "By who?" I asked, recording on my phone. He glanced at the camera. "Turn that off." "No." His jaw tightened. "This is bigger than you." "That's what everyone keeps saying," I replied. "Funny how that always means illegal." He stepped back. "You have 48 hours to vacate the property." "Oh, what?" He didn't answer. They left behind paperwork, emergency environmental seizure orders, unsigned but stamped. Sloppy, rushed, desperation. That night, the journalist called. "I verified enough to go public," she said. "But once this breaks, they'll come down hard. On you." "I know," I said. "Then you need to be somewhere visible." I looked out over the land. Smoke still hung low, turning the moon red. I already am. The story broke at 6 a.m. By noon, it was everywhere. Illegal water extraction, manufactured drought, shell companies, corrupt officials, satellite images comparing suppressed vegetation zones to secret pipeline routes. My ranch, the bankrupt one, sat at the center of it all like a pin in a map. The response was chaos. State agencies contradicted each other. County offices closed for review. Investors issued denials that contradicted their own filings. Protesters showed up at the gates by evening, some in support, some angry, some clearly planted. And the trucks? They came back one last time. 4 of them, same formation. But this time, I wasn't alone. Media vans lined the road. Drones, legitimate ones, hovered overhead. Cameras rolled. Microphones pointed. The leader got out, took one look around, and knew. He walked up to the gate anyway. "This isn't over," he said quietly. "No," I replied. "It's just visible now." He stared at me for a long moment, then turned and left. As the engines faded, I felt something I hadn't since the auction room. Control. They had land, money, power. But I had the truth, and the land was finally waking up, and it was thirsty no more. Exposure didn't end the danger. It changed its shape. The day after the story broke, helicopters circled the ranch from dawn to dusk. News crews, state surveyors, private contractors pretending not to know why they were there. The land that had been ignored for years was suddenly the most interesting place in 3 states. Every tire track was photographed, every well flagged, every fence line argued over. And still, at night, the trucks prowled the outskirts. They didn't cross the gate anymore, not with cameras watching. Instead, They stayed just beyond the legal boundary, engines idling in the dark like predators testing a fence, letting me know that visibility didn't mean safety. The journalist warned me. Public attention fades. Their money won't. She was right. 3 days later, the injunction started. First came the environmental freeze order. No drilling, no pumping, no construction pending investigation. Then the civil suits, breach of resource protection, interference with commercial contracts, defamation. All filed by different entities, all using the same law firm. Paper warfare. They were trying to drown me in process instead of bullets. But the land itself was done being quiet. On the 5th morning, a state hydrologist pulled me aside. Off the record, she said, lowering her voice, this basin shouldn't exist. What do you mean? I asked. She pointed to her tablet, scrolling through seismic scans and pressure models. This much water, this close to the surface, under land officially declared dry? Someone's been actively suppressing pressure release, blocking natural vents, rerouting flow. Can you prove it? She met my eyes. We already have. The official announcement came that afternoon. Emergency restoration of natural water flow pending criminal investigation. That's when the sabotage escalated. A pipeline north of the ridge ruptured overnight. Thousands of gallons spilled into the basin, deliberately misdirected to frame the restoration effort as negligent. Within hours, headlines shifted. Environmental disaster at contested ranch. I watched the coverage in disbelief as a narrative twisted in real time. Then my phone rang. Unknown number. Again. You should have taken the money, the voice said. This is on you, I replied. A pause. Then, softly, then you'll understand why we can't stop. That night, the ranch house was hit. Not burned. Not shut. Cut. I came back from checking the north fence to find the front door hanging open, hinges sliced clean through. Inside, everything was intact, except the journal. Gone. They hadn't taken electronics, hadn't touched the hard drives. They wanted one thing, the previous owner's words. They were afraid of the story. I didn't sleep. I sat on the porch with a rifle across my knees and watched the stars wheel overhead. Around 3 a.m., headlights flared on the ridge. One truck, then another. I didn't move. Neither did they. At sunrise, a convoy arrived, but not theirs. Federal. Marked vehicles. Uniforms with badges this time. Agents fanned out, securing the well sites, the burned areas, the pipeline junctions. One of them approached me with a folder thick enough to hurt someone. You're not in trouble, he said, but you're not out of it either. What changed? I asked. He flipped the folder open. Someone inside their operation talked. A whistleblower. The name was redacted, but the testimony wasn't. It detailed everything, from bribed officials to staged drought data to the intimidation tactics used to clear land. It even referenced the previous owner's accidental well contamination. Murder, dressed as misfortune. The ranch wasn't bankrupt. It had been bled dry on purpose. By evening, arrests started rolling in. County officials, contractors, shell company executives. The parent firm's assets were frozen pending international review. But the leader, the man from the trucks, wasn't among them. That bothered me. 2 nights later, I found out why. I was woken by the sound of digging. Not close, but deliberate. I followed it north, staying downwind, heart pounding. The sound led me to the ridge, near where I buried the first hard drive. My stomach dropped. They knew. 3 men worked quietly under red lights. The leader stood off to the side, watching. I didn't confront them. I filmed. From a distance, steady hands, slow breath. The leader spoke quietly, giving instructions. When they pulled the case from the ground, he nodded. Insurance, he said. They left without noticing me. I waited an hour before retrieving the second drive and moving it again, this time off the ranch, into the hands of the feds. The next morning, the leader disappeared. No arrest, no warrant served. Just gone. The investigation continued without him, but something felt unfinished, like a storm that had passed without fully breaking. Then the water came back, not in a flood, not violently. It seeped into dry creek beds. Green crept across the land. Wildlife returned cautiously, then confidently. The ranch began to breathe again. Standing on the ridge, watching grass push through soil that had been declared dead, I felt the weight of what this place had endured, and what it had survived. They tried to control water. But water remembers where it belongs, and so does land. I thought the worst was over. I was wrong. Section 5. When the ground started talking back. Exposure didn't end the danger. It only changed its shape. The morning after the investigation went public, helicopters started circling the ranch like vultures with press badges. News crews, state surveyors, independent consultants. Everyone suddenly wanted a piece of land that had been ignored for years. The irony tasted bitter. When the ranch was supposedly worthless, no one came. When the truth surfaced, it became prime real estate overnight. At night, the attention vanished. That's when the trucks returned. They never crossed the gate anymore, not with cameras nearby. Instead, they parked just beyond the legal boundary, engines idling in the darkness. Headlights off, presence unmistakable. A reminder that visibility didn't mean protection. I slept lightly, if at all. 3 days later, the legal attacks began. First came the emergency environmental injunction. No drilling, no water movement, no land modification pending review. Then came the lawsuits. Not one, not two, 7, filed in different jurisdictions, by different companies, all represented by the same law firm. Interference with commercial operations. Defamation. Unauthorized access to protected infrastructure. Paper bullets. They couldn't scare me off the land anymore, so they tried to bury me under procedure. Every filing drained time, money, energy. The message was clear. Even if you're right, we can still ruin you. But the land didn't cooperate with their timeline. On the 5th day, a state hydrologist pulled me aside during a site inspection. She spoke quietly, eyes darting toward a cluster of suited observers. Off the record, she said, this basin shouldn't exist. What do you mean? I asked. She turned her tablet toward me. Seismic scans, pressure readings, subsurface flow models. This aquifer has been artificially suppressed. Pressure vents capped. Natural flow rerouted. Someone actively prevented surface recharge. Can you prove it? Her jaw tightened. We already have. That afternoon, the state issued an emergency restoration order, immediate uncapping of natural water pathways pending criminal review. It was the first official acknowledgement that the drought had been engineered. That's when things turned ugly. That night, a pipeline north of the ridge ruptured. Thousands of gallons of water spilled into a protected basin, deliberately misdirected. Within hours, the narrative flipped. Headlines screamed environmental disaster linked to contested ranch. Talking heads speculated recklessly. Social media lit up with accusations. I watched in disbelief as the story twisted in real time. Someone wanted chaos. My phone rang. Unknown number. You should have taken the money, the voice said calmly. You sabotaged the pipeline. I replied. A pause. Then, colder, you made this necessary. That night, they came inside the house. Not violently, surgically. I returned from checking the north fence to find the front door hanging open. Hinges sliced clean through. No splintering, no forced entry. Inside, everything was exactly where I'd left it. Except one thing. The journal was gone. They hadn't touched electronics. Hadn't searched for the hard drives. They took the previous owner's words, his handwriting, his fear, his final warnings. They weren't afraid of evidence anymore. They were afraid of narrative. I didn't sleep. I sat on the porch with a rifle across my knees, watching the stars burn holes in the sky. Around 3 in the morning, headlights appeared on the ridge. One truck, then another. They stayed there until dawn. At sunrise, a different convoy arrived. Federal vehicles. Marked. Real. Agents secured the wells, the burned areas, the pipeline rupture site. One of them approached me with a folder thick enough to break a wrist. You're not under arrest, he said. But you're central to this. What changed? I asked. He flipped the folder open. Someone talked. A whistleblower. The name was redacted, but the testimony wasn't. It outlined everything: bribed officials, falsified drought data, intimidation protocols, land suppression strategies. It even detailed how the previous owner's south well had been accidentally contaminated. It wasn't an accident. It was murder hidden behind bureaucracy. By nightfall, arrests began. County officials, environmental consultants, shell company executives. The parent firm's assets were frozen pending international review. But one name was missing: the leader, the man from the trucks. No warrant, no arrest, no record of his existence. That unsettled me more than anything else. 2 nights later, I heard digging. Soft, controlled, intentional. I followed the sound north, keeping low, heart hammering. Red lights flickered near the ridge, exactly where I buried the first hard drive. My stomach dropped. 3 men worked quietly. The leader stood a few yards back, hands in his pockets, watching. I didn't confront them. I recorded. Steady breath. Zoomed lens. When they unearthed the seal case, he nodded once. Insurance, he said. They left without ever knowing I was there. An hour later, I retrieved the remaining drives and moved them off-site, straight into federal custody. The next morning, the leader vanished. No trace. No charges. No body. Just absence. The investigation rolled on without him. Indictments stacked up. Court dates filled calendars. But it felt unfinished, like a storm that passed without breaking. Then the water returned. Not violently. Not all at once. It seeped into dry creek beds. Green spread cautiously across the land. Birds returned. Then deer. Then cattle from neighboring ranches wandered close to the fence, sensing something had changed. Standing on the ridge, watching life reclaim soil declared dead, I understood what they'd underestimated. You can suppress water. You can reroute it. But you can't erase its memory. And you can't erase land that's ready to live again. I thought that meant the fight was over. I was wrong. The trucks never came back. That was how I knew it was truly over. Not because justice had been served cleanly or completely. It hadn't. Not because every name on those emails ended up in handcuffs. Many didn't. But because the kind of people who move in shadows don't linger once the light stops flickering. They vanish. Spring arrived quietly. Grass thickened across the flats, turning the land to green that hadn't existed here in decades. The dry creek bed ran again, shallow but steady, carving their remembered paths through the soil like old stories being retold. The ranch stopped feeling haunted and started feeling awake. The investigations dragged on for months. Hearings, depositions, federal reviews. The parent company dissolved itself on paper, assets redistributed through labyrinths of holding firms. A few executives became scapegoats. Several county officials lost their jobs. One went to prison. The leader was never found. Sometimes I still expect to see headlights on the ridge. Sometimes I wake to silence so deep it feels deliberate. But the land no longer feels watched. It feels held. The journalists won awards. The story became a case study in policy journals and environmental law programs. People debated it online, arguing over whether I'd been brave or reckless, lucky or stupid. Most never understood the real cost. I do. The ranch almost broke me. Financially, legally, emotionally. It took everything I had and then asked for more. I sold nearly everything that tied me to my old life. Friends drifted away, tired of the risk, the uncertainty. I learned how thin the line is between ownership and isolation. But the land gave something back. One evening, months later, I found something buried near the North Ridge, not hidden, just overlooked. A wooden marker, weathered almost to nothing. No name, just a date that matched the previous owner's last journal entry. I stood there a long time. He hadn't lost the ranch. He died trying to save it. I placed the journal's final page inside a waterproof sleeve and buried it beneath the marker, not as evidence, as acknowledgement. The ranch is running cattle again now. Not many, not aggressively. The land sets a pace. I've learned to listen, to soil, to water, to silence. The well I drilled feeds a shared basin now, monitored openly, transparently. Neighboring ranchers come by sometimes just to stand near the water and shake their heads. We were told it was gone, one of them said once. So was I. I replied, Every so often, someone asks if I'd do it again. I always pause before answering, because the truth is complicated. I didn't set out to be a whistleblower or symbol. I wanted land, space, a chance to build something honest. What I found instead was a system that treated scarcity like a business plan and land like a chessboard. I paid for that knowledge in fear and blood and nights without sleep. But I also learned something most people never do. Power doesn't live in boardrooms. It lives where people stop paying attention. And sometimes it lives under your feet, waiting for someone stubborn enough to dig where they are told not to. The deed still hangs on the wall inside the house, framed now, the bullet scar and the porch railing repaired but not erased. A reminder, not of danger, of responsibility, because land remembers. And once it trusts you, it never forgets. That's the real cost of the ranch. And the reason I stayed,